A broke mechanic helped a struggling child take her first pain-free steps in a rainy parking lot. She thought it was just another repair job. She didn't know the child's father was the most feared mafia boss in the city. And she definitely didn't know what he'd do to keep her in their lives forever. The rain hit the windshield like bullets. Clara Martinez wiped her grease-stained hands on her coveralls and stared at the stack of overdue bills on her desk. The fluorescent lights in her tiny garage flickered, another thing she couldn't afford to fix. 28 years old, and she was 3 months behind on rent for a business that barely made enough to keep her fed. "Should have stayed in school," she muttered, reaching for the light switch. That's when she heard it, the expensive purr of an engine dying right outside her garage door. Through the rain-streaked window, Clara saw something she'd never seen in this neighborhood. A black Mercedes S-Class, the kind that cost more than she'd make in 5 years. It rolled to a stop under the broken streetlight, steam hissing from under its hood. Clara's instinct was to ignore it. Rich people had roadside assistance. They didn't need a struggling mechanic in the worst part of Brooklyn. But then the back door opened, and she saw the girl. She couldn't have been more than 10, struggling to get out of the car, her small face twisted in frustration. A man emerged from the driver's side, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost what Clara paid in rent for 6 months. He moved to help the girl, but she pushed his hands away with the fierce independence of someone tired of being treated like she might break. Clara was already moving toward the door. "Need help," she called out, stepping into the rain. The man turned, and Clara felt something cold slide down her spine. He had the kind of face that made you forget what you were going to say, not because he was handsome, though he was, but because of the way his dark eyes assessed her, calculating, measuring threat levels in a millisecond. "The car died," he said simply. His voice carried the faint trace of a New York Italian accent, the kind that had mostly faded from the city, but lingered in certain families. "Can you fix it?" "I can look at it," Clara approached, deliberately keeping her movements casual. Something about this man set off alarms, but she couldn't place why. "Pop the hood." While he did, Clara glanced at the girl, who had finally made it out of the car and was leaning heavily against the door, breathing hard. She wore leg braces, the expensive medical kind, but they clearly weren't fitted right. The metal dug into her skin above her shoes, and the joints looked stiff, unforgiving. "You okay?" Clara asked her. The girl looked up, surprised someone was talking to her instead of about her. She had the same dark eyes as the man, but hers held something softer. Hope, maybe, or just the desperate wish that someone would see her as more than her disability. "I'm fine," she said, but Clara could see she wasn't. Clara dove into the engine, her hands finding problems like a pianist finding keys. The rain soaked through her shirt, but she barely noticed. This was what she was good at, seeing how things worked, understanding why they didn't. "Alternator shot," she announced 5 minutes later. "I can replace it, but not tonight. I need to order the part." "How long?" the man asked. 2 days, maybe 3. "We need the car now." Clara wiped rain from her face. "Then I can rig something temporary. Get you maybe 20 miles, enough to get wherever you're going. But it'll die again, and next time it might not be fixable." The man considered this, then nodded. "Do it." Clara worked fast, bypassing the damaged alternator and connecting the battery directly to the ignition system. It was a hack job, the kind of thing that made her cringe professionally, but it would work. Behind her, she could hear the girl struggling, trying to walk toward the garage entrance and out of the rain. Each step sounded painful, metal scraping against metal, breath coming in short gasps. Clara glanced back and saw the problem immediately. The braces were locked at the wrong angle, forcing the girl's legs into an unnatural position. Whoever had fitted them had focused on support, but forgot about movement. "Hey," Clara said, straightening up. "Your braces are adjusted wrong." The man's head snapped toward her, eyes sharp. "What?" "Her braces. They're fighting against her instead of helping." "Mind if I look?" The girl, Lucia, Clara would later learn, looked at her father with such desperate hope that Clara felt something crack in her chest. The man hesitated, clearly warring with himself, then gave a curt nod. Clara knelt in the rain beside Lucia, ignoring the cold water soaking into her jeans. Up close, the problem was even more obvious. The joint locks were set for standing, not walking, and the support bar pressed directly against bone instead of muscle. "This is gonna sound weird," Clara said, "but I think I can help. The car door has an adjustable support bar." She trailed off, mind already working through the mechanics. She ran back to her garage, grabbed her toolkit, and returned. For the next 10 minutes, Clara worked in focused silence, detaching the car door's internal support mechanism, adjusting its tension, and jury-rigging it onto Lucia's braces with medical tape and wire. She modified the angle, redistributed the pressure points, and adjusted the knee joint to allow for natural movement instead of forcing rigidity. "Okay," Clara said finally, rocking back on her heels. "Try putting weight on it now." Lucia looked at her father. He nodded slowly. The girl pushed off from the car, and for the first time in who knows how long, she took a step without grimacing. Then another. The motion was still assisted, still careful, but the pain was gone from her face, replaced by something Clara hadn't seen before. Pure joy. "Papa," Lucia whispered, her voice cracking. "It doesn't hurt." The man, Matteo, though Clara didn't know his name yet, stared at his daughter walking, really walking, for the first time in months. When he looked back at Clara, something had changed in his eyes. The calculation was still there, but now there was something else. Something dangerous. Respect. "How much do I owe you?" he asked quietly. "For the car? $80. For the braces? Nothing." That was just Clara shrugged. Basic mechanics. Matteo pulled out a wallet thick with $100 bills. He handed her 5 of them. "The car service was $80, Clara protested. "The rest is for your discretion," Matteo said. His tone made it clear this wasn't a request. "You didn't see us." This conversation didn't happen. Clara's instincts screamed that she should ask questions, should demand to know what she'd just gotten involved in. But she looked at Lucia, still taking careful steps, still smiling like someone had just handed her the world, and she found herself nodding. "Never saw you," she agreed. They drove away into the rain, the Mercedes coughing but running. Clara stood in the downpour, $500 in her hand, and wondered what kind of mistake she'd just made. She wouldn't have to wonder for long. Matteo Ricci hadn't become one of New York's most feared men by trusting strangers. Yet here he was, driving through the rain-slicked streets of Brooklyn, his daughter chattering excitedly in the back seat, and all he could think about was the mechanic with grease under her fingernails who had just done what a team of orthopedic specialists at Mount Sinai couldn't. "Papa, did you see? I walked without it hurting." Lucia's voice bubbled with joy. She just looked at it for a minute and knew exactly what was wrong. Dr. Morrison said the braces were fitted perfectly, but they hurt every single day, and she fixed it in the rain with stuff from a car door. Matteo glanced in the rear-view mirror. Lucia was touching her braces like they were made of gold now, her fingers tracing the modifications Clara had made. The pain lines that had become permanent fixtures around his daughter's eyes for the past 6 months were gone. 6 months. $50,000 in consultations. The best pediatric orthopedic surgeon in the state. And none of them had figured out what a broke mechanic in a failing garage had spotted in 30 seconds. "She was nice too," Lucia continued. "Not nice like the doctors who use their baby voices. Actually nice. She talked to me like I was normal." Normal? The word stabbed at Matteo's chest. Lucia had been in a car accident 2 years ago, a hit and run that had shattered her left leg and damaged nerves in her right. The driver was never caught, but Matteo had found him anyway. That was a closed chapter. What wasn't closed was watching his bright, fearless daughter slowly withdraw into herself as surgeries failed and doctors offered sympathy instead of solutions. "We'll send her a proper thank you," Matteo said carefully. "But Lucia, you can't go back there." "Why not?" "Because that neighborhood is controlled by the Castellano family. Because I have enemies who would love to know my daughter has a regular schedule anywhere outside our protected territory. Because that mechanic, however skilled, is a civilian who doesn't understand the world we live in. It's not safe, he said instead. Lucia went quiet, and Mateo recognized the stubborn set of her jaw in the mirror. She had inherited that from him, along with the dark eyes and the inability to accept defeat. His phone buzzed. Vincent, his second in command. We need to talk about the Castellano situation, Vincent said without preamble. Tomorrow. Boss, they hit another one of our. Tomorrow, Vincent. Mateo hung up. The car sputtered, and Mateo swore under his breath. The mechanic had warned him. 20 miles. They were barely at 15, and home was still 10 minutes away. He coaxed the Mercedes through 3 more blocks before it died completely outside a 24-hour diner on Fifth Avenue. Mateo called for pickup, then took Lucia inside to wait. She ordered hot chocolate and sat in the booth, still talking about the garage lady. She had this look, Lucia said, like she could see right through the metal to what was wrong underneath. That's a superpower, Papa. Like X-ray vision, but for machines. Mateo's coffee arrived, bitter and too hot. He sipped it anyway. The truth was he'd noticed the same thing. When Clara Martinez had knelt in the rain beside his daughter, there had been no hesitation, no uncertainty. She'd seen the problem, understood it, and fixed it. No consultation fees. No 3-week waiting periods for appointments. No condescending explanations about how these things take time. She'd just done it. In Mateo's world, competence was currency. He surrounded himself with the best, the smartest lawyers, the most ruthless enforcers, the most connected politicians. He paid top dollar for excellence because excellence kept him alive and his family safe. But this mechanic hadn't wanted money. She'd refused payment for helping Lucia. That bothered him more than it should.
People always wanted something.
Always. You just had to figure out what it was. Do you think she can make me walk without the braces one day? Lucia asked suddenly, her voice small. Mateo looked at his daughter, really looked at her. She was 10 years old, and she'd stopped dreaming of running, of dancing, of being like the other kids at her private school. The accident had taken more than her mobility. It had taken her hope. Until tonight. Until a stranger in a rundown garage had handed it back to her. I don't know, baby, Mateo said honestly. Can we at least ask her? Mateo's phone buzzed again. 3 texts from Vincent. 2 from his attorney. 1 from his sister Rosa, asking if Lucia had a good day. The world kept spinning, demanding his attention, his decisions, his control. But in this moment, sitting in a cheap diner with weak coffee, all Mateo could see was Clara Martinez kneeling in the rain, her hands steady as she rebuilt his daughter's braces with nothing but car parts and intuition. A black SUV pulled up outside. Marco, one of his drivers, climbed out. Mateo helped Lucia into the vehicle, watching her test her braces with each step. No grimace. No sharp intake of breath. Just walking. Papa, Lucia said as they drove toward their estate in Long Island. I know you said I can't go back. But what if my braces break again? Dr. Morrison doesn't know how to fix what she did. It was a valid point. One that Mateo had already considered and didn't like. The modifications Clara had made were temporary, improvised. They'd need maintenance, adjustments, probably rebuilding. Which meant either finding another specialist who could understand what she'd done, unlikely, or going back to the source. Neither option was ideal. Both carried risks. But as Mateo carried his sleeping daughter into their home 2 hours later, carefully so as not to wake her, he made a decision. He'd have Vincent run a complete background check on Clara Martinez. Every detail of her life. Every debt. Every connection. If she was clean, and that was a big if, maybe, just maybe, she could be useful. Not for him. For Lucia. Everything Mateo did was for Lucia. He laid his daughter in her bed, pulled the covers up, and kissed her forehead. She stirred slightly, murmuring in her sleep. Garage lady fixed it, Papa. She fixed it. Mateo turned off the light and closed the door. Tomorrow he'd make calls. Tomorrow he'd investigate. Tomorrow he'd decide if the mechanic who'd done the impossible could be trusted. But tonight, for the first time in 2 years, his daughter had gone to sleep without crying from pain. That was worth investigating. That was worth almost anything. Clara was under a 2008 Honda Civic, fighting with a stubborn oil pan, when she heard the footsteps. Not the usual shuffle of her regular customers, Mrs. Chun with her minivan or Tony from the pizzeria with his delivery truck. These were different, deliberate, controlled. The kind of footsteps that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. She rolled out from under the car, wrench in hand, and froze. The girl from the rainy night, Lucia, stood in the doorway of her garage, backlit by afternoon sun. Behind her loomed a man built like a refrigerator, wearing sunglasses indoors and a jacket that didn't quite hide the bulge under his left arm. Clara had grown up in this neighborhood. She knew what a gun looked like under a jacket. Clara said, getting to her feet slowly. "Can I help you?" Lucia stepped forward, and Clara saw immediately that something was wrong. The girl was limping badly, worse than before, and her face was tight with pain she was trying to hide. "It broke," Lucia said, her voice small. She held up her right leg slightly. "The brace. The part you fixed. I was walking down the stairs at school, and it just snapped." The bodyguard, because that's clearly what he was, shifted his weight. His hand moved fractionally closer to his jacket. Clara's mind raced. This was bad. This was getting involved in something dangerous bad. The smart move would be to say she couldn't help, to send them to a real medical equipment specialist, to forget this ever happened. But then Lucia looked up at her with those desperate dark eyes, and Clara heard herself say, "Okay, let me see it." The bodyguard spoke for the first time. "Miss Ricci needs to be home in 90 minutes. Miss Ricci." So now Clara had a last name. She wished she didn't. "I'll be fast," Clara said, gesturing to her workbench. "Lucia, you can sit here." The bodyguard, his name tag said Marco, positioned himself by the door, watching the street, watching Clara. His hand never moved far from his jacket. Clara knelt beside Lucia and examined the brace. The support bar she'd modified had indeed snapped, but not from poor workmanship. The metal had stress fractures, which meant Lucia had been using it, really using it, walking more than she had in months, probably, pushing herself. "You've been walking a lot," Clara observed. Lucia's face lit up despite the pain. "Every day. I walked to my classes instead of using the wheelchair. I walked around the whole garden at home. Papa couldn't believe it. He kept asking if it hurt, but it didn't. Not until this morning when it broke." Clara felt something warm spread through her chest. This kid had been trapped in pain and immobility, and a simple fix had given her freedom back. That meant something. "The problem is the metal I used," Clara explained, reaching for her tools. "It was from a car door, meant for occasional use, not constant stress. I need to rebuild this with something stronger." She surveyed her garage, her mind cataloging materials. Her eyes landed on a damaged titanium bike frame she'd been meaning to scrap. Titanium. Light, flexible, incredibly strong. "Give me 40 minutes, Clara said. She worked with focused intensity, cutting and shaping the titanium, creating a new support structure that would flex with Lucia's movement instead of fighting it. As she worked, Lucia talked. "Dr. Morrison was so confused when he saw what you did," Lucia said. "He kept asking where we'd gotten the modifications done. Papa wouldn't tell him. He just said we'd handled it privately." Clara's hands paused for a fraction of a second. Something about the way Lucia said Papa wouldn't tell him sent a warning signal through her brain. "Your dad seems protective," Clara said carefully. "He has to be," Lucia said, as if this was obvious. "Because of his work." "What does he do?" Marco shifted by the door. Clara felt his attention sharpen. "Imports and exports," Lucia said quickly, with the rehearsed quality of a line she'd been taught to say. "He's very busy. Important meetings all the time."
"Right,"
imports and exports. With bodyguards and $500 tips and cars that cost more than Clara's entire business. Clara kept her mouth shut and kept working. She didn't just repair the brace. She improved it. Added a micro-adjustment system using bike gear components, allowing Lucia to fine-tune the tension herself. Reinforced the joints with aircraft-grade bolts. Lighten the overall weight by 30%. When she finished, Clara had created something that belonged in a medical journal, not a Brooklyn garage.
Try it, she said.
Lucia stood slowly, testing her weight. Then she took a step. Another. Her eyes went wide. It's better than before, she whispered. It's so much better. I can barely feel it. She walked a circle around the garage, gaining confidence with each step. By the third lap, she was grinning so wide Clara thought her face might split. How much? Marco asked gruffly, pulling out a wallet. Nothing, Clara said. Just be careful with it this time. That titanium is strong, but it's not indestructible. Marco frowned, clearly uncomfortable with taking something for free. He pulled out $300 bills and set them on the workbench.
For your time, he said.
It wasn't a suggestion. Lucia hugged Clara suddenly, fiercely. Thank you, she whispered. You don't know what this means. But Clara was starting to. She was starting to understand that she'd stumbled into something bigger than a broken car on a rainy night. Something involving a little girl who needed help and a family that operated by different rules than normal people. As Marco led Lucia back to the black SUV parked down the street, how had Clara not noticed that before? Lucia turned back and waved. Can I come back? She called. If something breaks again? Clara should have said no. Every instinct screamed to cut ties now, before whatever this was got deeper. Sure, she heard herself say. Yeah, you can come back. The SUV pulled away, and Clara stood in her garage, holding $300 she hadn't asked for, and wondered what kind of trouble she'd just invited into her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Thank you for helping my daughter. M.R. Clara stared at the message for a long time before deleting it. She didn't need proof of this connection. Didn't need a trail. But something told her it was already too late for that. The first Tuesday, Lucia showed up with Marco and asked if Clara could teach her about engines. Clara, who was replacing a transmission on a Ford Explorer, looked up in surprise. Engines? Papa says I should learn practical skills, Lucia explained, though her eyes kept drifting to her braces. And I like it here. It smells like possibility. That was such an odd, perfect thing to say that Clara found herself agreeing. The second Tuesday, Lucia brought a sketch. She'd drawn modifications she thought might make the braces even better, most of them impossible, some brilliant. Clara showed her how to use a socket wrench while secretly implementing the one idea that might actually work. By the third Tuesday, it wasn't even a question. Lucia would arrive at 4:30, do her homework on Clara's desk, then watch with laser focus as Clara worked on whatever project was in the bay. And always, Clara would spend the last 30 minutes adjusting, modifying, and improving Lucia's braces. You're walking smoother, Clara observed one afternoon, watching Lucia cross the garage without holding onto anything. Almost no compensating with your hip. I walked up all the stairs at school yesterday, Lucia said proudly. Didn't use the elevator once. My teacher cried. She was happy crying, but still. Clara smiled, adjusting a joint mechanism. She'd replaced the standard hinge with a custom ball bearing system scavenged from a luxury car's suspension. The movement was smoother now, more natural. Tell me again why your dad pays for expensive doctors when you've got me fixing you with junkyard parts, Clara said, half joking. Lucia's face went serious. Because doctors see what's broken. You see what's possible. The words hit Clara harder than they should have. She focused on the brace, threading a new tension cable through the frame. Marco stood by the door as always, silent and watchful. Over the weeks, he'd relaxed slightly. He no longer kept his hand near his gun when Clara moved too quickly. He'd even accepted the coffee she'd offered last week, though he'd inspected it thoroughly before drinking. "Miss Martinez," Marco said one afternoon, "Mr. Ricci would like to know what materials you need." "Proper materials. He can have them delivered." Clara looked up from where she was crafting a new ankle support from an old motorcycle footpeg. "I'm good with what I have. Creativity works better than money sometimes." Marco looked skeptical but nodded. What Clara didn't say was that she liked the challenge. Liked taking broken things, discarded car parts, damaged bike frames, scrap metal, and turning them into something that helped this kid walk. There was poetry in it. Redemption for all the things she couldn't fix in her own life. By week 5, Lucia was walking with only a slight limp. Clara had built her 3 different support frames, lightweight for school, reinforced for outdoor activities, and a minimal brace for therapy exercises. Each one was custom-fitted, adjusted weekly as Lucia's muscles grew stronger. "You're a genius," Lucia declared one Tuesday, testing the new lightweight frame. "Like Tony Stark, but for legs instead of suits." "Tony Stark is fictional," Clara pointed out. "So? You're doing impossible things too." Clara snorted, but she felt a glow of pride she hadn't experienced since dropping out of MIT 6 years ago. Back then, she'd been developing prosthetic limb technology, dreaming of patents and changing lives. Then her mom got sick, the money ran out, and dreams became luxuries she couldn't afford. But here in this garage, maybe she was changing a life after all. Just one. But one that mattered. "How's your hip feeling when you walk now?" Clara asked, making notes in the journal she'd started keeping about Lucia's progress. "Better." The physical therapist asked what I'd been doing differently. I told her I had a secret weapon. "Lucia." "Don't worry, I didn't say your name. I just said I found someone who understood mechanics better than medicine." Marco's phone buzzed. He answered, listened, then looked at Clara with an expression she couldn't read. "Mr. Ricci is 5 minutes away," he said. "He'd like to see the workshop." Clara's stomach dropped. "He's coming here?" "He's been curious," Marco said simply, "about what his daughter does every Tuesday for 2 hours. Lucia grabbed Clara's hand. "It's okay. Papa just wants to see you're not a crazy person." "You're not a crazy person, right?" "Jury's still out," Clara muttered, quickly shoving tools back into organized chaos. For minutes later, a black Mercedes, newer than the one that had broken down, pulled up outside. Matteo Ricci stepped out wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Clara's monthly revenue. He filled the doorway of her garage, and Clara was struck again by the barely contained power in him. Like a weapon in a display case, beautiful, dangerous, and just waiting for an excuse. "Mr. Ricci," Clara said, wiping her hands on her coveralls. "Welcome to the kingdom of Greece and broken dreams." His mouth twitched. Almost a smile. "My daughter speaks highly of your kingdom. Papa, look." Lucia walked toward him, her steps confident and smooth. "Watch how stable I am now." Clara built a gyroscopic balance system into the ankle joint. "It autocorrects if I start to tilt." Matteo watched his daughter walk, and Clara saw something shift in his face. The hard edges softened. The dangerous man became just a father, watching his child do something he'd been told might never happen. "Remarkable," he said quietly. His eyes moved to Clara. "You've been doing this every week." "She's an excellent student," Clara said. "Asks good questions. Understands mechanical principles faster than most adults." "I meant the braces. The modifications." Clara shrugged. She needed help. "I can help. It's not complicated." But Matteo's expression said it was complicated. Very complicated. "We should discuss compensation," he said. "Proper payment for your time and expertise. Lucia's homework company is payment enough. Kid knows more about Roman history than I ever did." Something flickered in Matteo's eyes. Surprise, maybe, or respect. He wasn't used to people refusing his money, Clara realized. Wasn't used to people who wanted nothing from him. "Nevertheless," Matteo said. "What you're doing for my daughter," he paused, and Clara heard the weight of unspoken things. "It matters. More than you know." He turned to leave, then stopped. Marco will continue to bring Lucia on Tuesdays. If that's acceptable. It's acceptable, Clara said. After they left, Clara stood in her garage, feeling like she'd just passed some kind of test she hadn't known she was taking. Her phone buzzed. Another unknown number. Thank you. M.R. This time, Clara didn't delete it. Mateo arrived on a Thursday, not a Tuesday. Clara was demonstrating leverage principles to Lucia using a car jack when she noticed him standing in the doorway. Not announcing himself. Just watching. She'd learned not to startle easily around Matteo Ricci. Men like him moved like predators, silent until they wanted to be heard. You're early, Clara said, not looking up from the jack. Or late. Depends on perspective. Neither, Matteo replied. I had business nearby. Thought I'd see what happens during these lessons. Lucia beamed. Papa. Clara's teaching me about mechanical advantage. Did you know a small force can lift something super heavy if you use the right lever point? It's basically magic, but with physics. Fascinating, Matteo said, and he actually sounded like he meant it. Clara gestured to a folding chair, the only clean seat in the garage. Pull up a throne. We're about to do walking drills. She expected him to decline, to check his expensive watch and remember some urgent meeting. Instead, Matteo sat, crossing one ankle over his knee, looking perfectly at ease in a garage that probably violated every health code in the city. Okay, Lucia, Clara said, standing. Remember what we worked on last week? Walking backward puts different stress on the joints. Let's see if the new ankle rotators are doing their job. Lucia positioned herself at one end of the garage, concentration written across her face. She took a breath, then began walking backward. Slow, careful, but steady. Clara walked beside her, not touching but close enough to catch if needed. Good. Feel that resistance? That's the rotor engaging. It's supposed to feel like that. Keep your weight centered. Perfect. Now, try turning while you back up. Lucia executed a clumsy, but successful pivot. Yes. Clara high-fived her. That's what I'm talking about. 3 months ago, you couldn't do that. 3 months ago, I couldn't do anything, Lucia said softly. Clara caught the shadow that crossed the girl's face, the memory of pain, of limitation, of a smaller world. She squeezed Lucia's shoulder. Well, you can do it now. That's what matters. Again. 5 more reps, then we adjust the tension cables. From his seat, Matteo watched the easy physical affection between them, the casual encouragement. In his world, touch was transactional, a handshake to seal a deal, a pat on the back that meant you'd pleased him, a hand on the shoulder that meant you were about to receive bad news. But Clara touched Lucia like it meant nothing and everything. A hand to steady her. A playful nudge when she made a joke. A high five for success. Natural. Unguarded.
It was such a small thing.
It shouldn't have mattered. But Matteo couldn't remember the last time someone had touched his daughter without a medical purpose or political calculation. After the drills, Clara had Lucia sit on the workbench while she examined the braces, making micro-adjustments with the precision of a jeweler. You're favoring your right side when you turn, Clara observed. Just slightly. Probably not even conscious of it. But I can add a counterbalance here. She pointed to the left brace's hip attachment. Redistribute the weight distribution by maybe 3 degrees. Will that fix it? Should help. We'll test it, and if it doesn't work, we try something else. That's engineering. Controlled failure until you find success. Lucia grinned. That's what Papa says about business too. Clara glanced at Matteo, one eyebrow raised. Your dad's secretly an engineer? Something like that, Matteo said dryly. Clara made the adjustment, then had Lucia walk figure eights around the garage bay. Better. More balanced. She made a note in her journal. Clara? Lucia asked. Can I ask you something? Shoot. Why do you help me? Like really? You don't charge Papa hardly anything. You spend hours every week on my braces. You could be making money on actual customers. Clara set down her wrench. It was a fair question. One she'd asked herself late at night when sleep wouldn't come. Honestly,
Clara said.
because I can. Because you walked into my garage with a problem I knew how to solve, and turning away from that felt wrong. And maybe she hesitated. Maybe because fixing things that everyone else says are broken is kind of my specialty. She meant it as a joke, but Mateo heard the truth underneath. This woman, with her failing business and overdue bills, saw herself in his daughter. Saw someone told they couldn't do something, told to accept limitation, and decided to fight back the only way she knew how. With grease-stained hands and stubborn determination. Plus, Clara added, lightening the mood, you're significantly better company than Mrs. Chen's minivan. That thing judges me. I can feel it. Lucia laughed, and the sound filled the garage like music. Mateo's phone buzzed. Vincent, no doubt with something requiring immediate attention. The underworld didn't pause for father-daughter moments. But for once, Mateo silenced it. He stayed for another hour, watching Clara guide Lucia through strength exercises, teach her about torque and tension, make her laugh while discussing compression ratios. Clara never performed for him, never changed her manner because he was there. She was exactly who she was, direct, warm, completely present. In Mateo's life, everyone performed. Everyone had an angle. His advisors told him what he wanted to hear. His enemies told him lies. His associates told him carefully calculated truths designed to benefit themselves. But Clara Martinez just told it straight. Your left cable is wearing faster than the right, she said, showing Lucia the frayed metal. Means you're putting more weight on that side. We need to work on balance exercises. Boring, but necessary. Okay, Lucia agreed without complaint. And you need to stop doing whatever you're doing at school that's creating this wear pattern. What are you doing? Playing soccer in these things. Lucia looked guilty. Just kickball. At recess. I wanted to play with the other kids. Clara's face softened. Okay, but we need to build you a sports brace. Something reinforced. Give me a week. She was going to build a custom sports brace. For kickball. For a kid who just wanted to be normal. Mateo felt something shift in his chest, a crack in the armor he'd worn for so long he'd forgotten it was there. When he finally stood to leave, Clara walked him to the door. She's doing really well, Clara said quietly, so Lucia wouldn't hear. Better than well. She's thriving. Whatever else is happening in her life, make sure she knows she's not defined by those braces. Mateo looked at this mechanic who barely reached his shoulder, who had no idea who he really was, who was giving him parenting advice with absolute confidence.
Thank you, he said.
And meant it in ways he couldn't explain. As he drove away, Mateo realized something unsettling. For the first time in 15 years, he'd met someone who didn't want anything from him. And somehow, that made her more dangerous than anyone he'd ever faced. Vincent Calabrese had been Mateo's second-in-command for 12 years. In that time, he'd learned to read his boss better than anyone, knew when silence meant approval, when it meant someone was about to die, and when it meant Mateo was working through a problem. Right now, sitting in Mateo's study at the Long Island estate, Vincent recognized a fourth type of silence. One he'd never encountered before. Uncertainty. Boss, Vincent said carefully. We need to talk about the mechanic. Mateo looked up from the papers on his desk. Legitimate business, shipping manifests from his actual import company. The legal side of his empire that paid taxes and employed accountants. What about her? Vincent exchanged glances with Tony Marcetti, Mateo's head of security, who stood by the window. They'd agreed Vincent would take point on this conversation. Mateo respected Vincent's judgment, usually. It's been 8 weeks, Vincent said. Lucia's been going to that garage every Tuesday, like clockwork. Marco reports the mechanic's background checks clean, but what? But too clean, Tony interjected. Clara Martinez, 28, dropped out of MIT in her junior year when her mother got cancer. Mother died 2 years ago. No siblings. No romantic relationships we can find. No political affiliations. No debt besides the garage lease and some medical bills. She's a ghost, boss. She's not a ghost, Mateo said flatly. She's a woman who minds her business. Or a woman who's been waiting for an opportunity exactly like this, Vincent pressed. Think about it. Beautiful daughter of a connected family, disabled, vulnerable. A struggling mechanic suddenly has access, builds trust, becomes indispensable. It's a perfect plan. Mateo's expression didn't change, but his fingers stopped moving across the papers. You think someone hired Clara Martinez to get close to Lucia? I think it's suspicious timing, Vincent said. The Castellanos have been pushing into Brooklyn. That garage is in their territory. She could be theirs. She fixed our car because it broke down, Mateo said, his voice dangerously quiet. In the rain. Without knowing who we were. Or she recognized the car, Tony suggested. Recognized you. Saw an opportunity. Vincent leaned forward. Boss, I'm not saying she's definitely a plant. I'm saying we can't ignore the possibility. You've taught us to question everything, trust no one outside the family. But with this woman, you're breaking your own rules. It was true, and Mateo knew it. He'd built his empire on paranoia and careful calculation. He vetted everyone, trusted few, and always assumed the worst of people's intentions because assuming the best got you killed. But he'd watched Clara with Lucia for 8 weeks. Watched her patience, her creativity, her genuine joy when Lucia succeeded. He'd seen no calculation in her eyes, no hidden agenda in her actions. He'd seen a woman who fixed broken things because she couldn't help herself. Run her finances again, Mateo said finally. Check for any deposits that don't match her income. Any new accounts, any unexplained purchases. If she's being paid by someone, find the money trail. Already did, Vincent said, sliding a folder across the desk. 3 times. She's exactly what she appears to be, broke. The money you've given her goes straight to rent and utilities. She bought better tools last week. That's it. Mateo opened the folder, scanning the financial records. Clara Martinez earned barely enough to survive. Her garage brought in maybe $3,000 a month on good months. She had $47 in her checking account right now. If she was a plant, whoever hired her was getting a hell of a discount. What does Marco say? Mateo asked. Vincent shifted uncomfortably. Marco thinks she's legitimate. Says she treats Lucia like a kid sister. No phones during visits, no photographs, no questions about you or the family business. She talks about engines and physics and shows Lucia YouTube videos about mechanical engineering. So Marco, who's with them every week, sees no threat. Marco's protective of the kid, Tony said. Might be clouding his judgment. Mateo closed the folder. Or maybe his judgment is the clearest because he's actually there. Boss. Enough, Mateo's voice cut like a blade. I understand your concerns. I share some of them. But Lucia has made more progress in 8 weeks with Clara than in 2 years with specialists. My daughter walks now. Really walks. She plays kickball with other kids. She smiles every Tuesday morning because she knows she's going to that garage. Vincent fell silent. They all knew what Lucia meant to Mateo. The girl was his world, his weakness, his only soft spot in an otherwise ruthless existence. I'm not blind to risk, Mateo continued. Marco stays with them. We monitor the garage. Any sign of surveillance, any contact with Castellano people, any indication she's not what she appears, we shut it down. Immediately. And if she is a plant?
Tony asked.
Mateo's eyes went cold. Then she picked the wrong family to infiltrate. The words hung in the air, a promise and a threat. Vincent nodded slowly. He'd pushed as far as he could. I'll keep eyes on her. Discreetly. You do that. After they left, Mateo sat alone in his study, staring at Clara's financial records. The numbers told a story of quiet desperation, someone barely holding on, working 80-hour weeks just to stay afloat. His phone buzzed. A text from Lucia. Clara says I can try walking without braces for short distances next month. She's building transition supports. Isn't that amazing? Matteo typed back, very amazing. Proud of you, baby. He set the phone down and poured himself 2 fingers of scotch. Vincent was right to be suspicious. In Matteo's world, trust got you killed. Everyone had an angle, everyone wanted something, and altruism was just manipulation with better marketing. But he'd watched Clara work, seen the focus in her eyes when she modified Lucia's braces, the way she celebrated every small victory like it was her own. He'd seen her refuse his money repeatedly, seen her spend hours helping his daughter for nothing but the satisfaction of solving a problem. Either Clara Martinez was the most dedicated undercover operative in history, maintaining cover to a degree that bordered on method acting, or she was exactly what she appeared to be. A good person in a hard situation, doing her best with what she had. Matteo finished his scotch. He'd been in this business long enough to know that good people were often the most dangerous. Not because they wanted to be, but because they made you want to believe in things you'd given up on. Things like trust. Like kindness without strings attached. Like maybe, just maybe, not everyone was trying to hurt you. That belief could get you killed faster than any bullet. But watching his daughter walk, seeing her smile, hearing her laugh, that was worth almost any risk. Almost. The Castellano family operated out of a restaurant in Bensonhurst, a legitimate Italian place with red-checkered tablecloths and the best osso buco in Brooklyn. In the back room, where tourists never went, Dominic Castellano held court. He was 53, silver-haired, and smiled like someone who'd never faced consequences for anything in his life. Because he hadn't. Tell me again, Dominic said, swirling wine in his glass. About the garage. Polly Torino, one of Dominic's street captains, leaned forward. Every Tuesday. 4:30, like clockwork. The Ricci girl shows up with one bodyguard, big guy named Marco. They stay 2 hours. Girl leaves walking better than she arrived. And the mechanic, Clara Martinez. Nobody important. Broke, no family, no connections. Wrong place, wrong time. Got lucky fixing Ricci's car couple months back. Dominic smiled. Luck. Interesting word for it. Around the table, 5 of Dominic's most trusted men waited. They'd been at war with the Ricci organization for 18 months, a slow, grinding conflict over territory, shipping routes, and old grudges that went back generations. Matteo Ricci was winning. He always won, the careful bastard. Never exposed himself. Never made mistakes, kept his family locked away in that Long Island fortress like some medieval lord. But now, apparently, he'd made a mistake. The girl's the key, Dominic said thoughtfully. Matteo's only child. His wife died 8 years ago. The daughter's all he has. We've tried getting to her before, another captain, Gino, pointed out. That private school is a fortress. The estate is impossible. The kid never goes anywhere without an army. Except Tuesday afternoons, Dominic said softly. To a garage in our territory. With 1 guard. The implications settled over the room like smoke. You want to grab the girl, Polly said. It wasn't a question. I want leverage, Dominic corrected. Matteo's been pushing into our operations for a year. Cost us $3 million last quarter alone. He thinks he's untouchable. Time to remind him, everyone has pressure points. Grabbing a kid, Gino looked uncomfortable. That's a line, boss. Brings heat we don't need. We're not going to hurt her, Dominic said, though his smile suggested otherwise. Just hold her for a few days. Make Matteo understand he needs to back off. Return her unharmed once he sees reason. The men around the table knew it wouldn't be that simple. Nothing ever was. But you didn't argue with Dominic Castellano if you wanted to keep breathing. Polly, I want full surveillance on the garage, Dominic ordered. The mechanic's routine, when she's alone, security weak points. I want to know every detail. And the bodyguard? 1 guard against 4 of ours? Not a problem. We move fast, we move smart, and we have the girl in a car before Ricci even knows what happened. When? Polly asked. Dominic sipped his wine.
Soon.
But not too soon. Let's watch a bit longer. Make sure there are no surprises. Clara noticed the car on Thursday. A dark blue Chevy Impala, parked across the street, same spot 3 days in a row. Different driver each time, but the same car. In a neighborhood where most people drove decade-old Hondas and Toyotas, a well-maintained newer car stood out. She told herself she was being paranoid. Told herself it was probably nothing. But she'd grown up in Brooklyn. She knew the difference between nothing and something pretending to be nothing. On Friday, she mentioned it to Marco when he brought Lucia for an extra session. The sports brace was ready for testing. Blue Impala, she said quietly while Lucia was in the bathroom. Across the street. Been there all week. Different guys. Marco's expression didn't change, but Clara saw his hand move toward his jacket. Which car? Gone now. But same spot every day. 2 to 6 p.m. You get a plate number? Wrote it down. Clara handed him a scrap of paper. Marco pocketed it without comment, but Clara noticed he positioned himself differently for the rest of the session, angled toward the door, checking the street every few minutes through the window. When Lucia tested the sports brace, reinforced joints, extra ankle support, impact-resistant plating disguised as normal athletic wear, she didn't seem to notice the tension. This is incredible. Lucia jogged slowly across the garage, her movements controlled but confident. I can actually run. Clara, I can run. Easy, Clara warned. Build up slowly. Don't push it too hard too fast. But Lucia was already planning. There's a 5K at school next month. For charity, do you think? Maybe, Clara said, not wanting to promise something that might not be safe. Let's see how the next few weeks go. After they left, Clara stood in her garage, tools in hand, and felt the weight of something shifting. The looks Marco had been giving the street. The text messages he'd sent while Lucia wasn't watching. The way his hand never left his jacket. Something was wrong. That night, Clara stayed late, working on an old Nissan's brake system. Around 9, she stepped outside to dump some used oil and saw it. The blue Impala, parked 2 blocks away, headlights off. Her stomach dropped. She went back inside, locked the door, and called the only number she had. Matteo answered on the second ring. Clara. There's a car, she said without preamble. Been watching the garage all week. Marco knows, but I thought you should too. Silence on the other end. Then, what kind of car? She described it, gave him the plate number from memory. Are you there now? At the garage. Yes. Lock the doors. I'm sending people. 20 minutes. I don't need 20 minutes, Clara. Stay inside. He hung up. Clara stood in her garage, surrounded by tools and car parts and the life she'd built with her own hands, and realized that life had just gotten very complicated. The blue Impala was still out there, watching, waiting. And Clara, who'd never hurt anyone in her life, who fixed things instead of breaking them, suddenly understood what Lucia had meant weeks ago. Papa has to be protective. Because of his work. Whatever that work was, it had just followed them to her door. Through the window, she watched the Impala's silhouette against the streetlights. Somewhere in that car, someone was watching her back. Clara picked up a tire iron, tested its weight, and waited for whatever came next. 18 minutes later, 3 black SUVs arrived. The blue Impala disappeared into the night. But Clara knew it would be back. Predators always came back. The surveillance got worse. Over the next week, Clara spotted 4 different vehicles rotating watch on her garage. They weren't even trying to be subtle anymore. A white van, a gray sedan, a black pickup, all parking within view. Engines running, men inside staring at her door. Matteo's response was immediate and overwhelming. Marco no longer came alone. Now Lucia arrived with 3 guards, 2 SUVs, and enough firepower to start a small war. They swept the garage before Lucia entered, positioned themselves at every entrance, and watched the street with the intensity of soldiers in a war zone. Because that's what this was, Clara realized. A war. and somehow her garage had become a battlefield. On Tuesday morning, she found bullet holes in her dumpster. Not fresh, maybe a few days old, but unmistakably bullet holes. 7 of them, clustered in a pattern that suggested someone had been practicing or sending a message. Clara stared at those holes for 20 minutes, her hands shaking. She'd grown up in Brooklyn, sure. She'd seen her share of trouble, knew which streets to avoid, which corners belonged to which crews. But knowing about violence and having it literally show up at your door were different things entirely. Mrs. Chin stopped bringing her minivan. Tony from the pizzeria called to cancel his delivery truck's oil change, his voice apologetic but firm. Even old Mr. Rodriguez, who'd been coming to Clara's garage for 5 years, suddenly found a different mechanic. Word was spreading. Clara's garage wasn't safe anymore. By Wednesday, she'd made her decision. When Lucia arrived on Thursday, an extra session because of a brace adjustment, Clara had her speech prepared. She'd practiced it in the mirror that morning, keeping her voice steady, her reasoning sound. "We need to talk," Clara said after Marco had done his security sweep. Lucia, who'd been chattering about her performance in gym class, went quiet. "That sounds serious." "It is." Clara set down her wrench. "Lucia, I think maybe we should stop these sessions. Just for a while. Until things calm down." The light died in Lucia's eyes so quickly it was like watching a candle get snuffed out. "What things?" Lucia asked, though her voice said she already knew. "The cars. The men watching." The Clara gestured helplessly. "All of it. This isn't safe anymore. Not for you, not for me." "But I'm always safe," Lucia protested. "Marco's here. Papa's guards are outside. Nothing's going to happen." "Something already happened. There are bullet holes in my dumpster, Lucia. My customers are leaving because they're scared to come here. This isn't. I can't." Clara stopped, swallowing hard. She wasn't going to cry. She was making a rational decision based on self-preservation. This was smart. This was survival. "I'll find you another specialist," Clara continued. "Someone legitimate, with an actual medical practice and credentials, and—" "I don't want another specialist." Lucia's voice cracked. "I want you. Lucia. Do you know what my life was like before I met you?" Tears were streaming down Lucia's face now, and Clara felt her resolve crumbling. "I couldn't walk without pain. I couldn't keep up with other kids. I sat in the wheelchair at school because it hurt too much to try. Teachers looked at me like I was broken. Kids avoided me because I was the disabled girl who might slow them down. I know, but... And then you fixed me." Lucia was sobbing now. In the rain with car parts, like it was nothing. Like I wasn't broken, just incorrectly calibrated. Do you know how that felt? Do you know what it's like to have someone see you as a problem they can solve instead of a tragedy they have to pity? Clara's carefully prepared speech evaporated. She knelt in front of Lucia, her own eyes burning. "You're not broken," Clara said fiercely. "You were never broken. But I felt broken. Until you. You made me feel like I could do anything. Like maybe one day I won't need braces at all. Like maybe I could be normal. You are normal. Then don't leave me." Lucia grabbed Clara's hands, her grip desperate. "Please. I know it's scary. I know Papa's world is dangerous. But you're the only person who's ever helped me without making it about them. Every doctor wants credit. Every therapist wants to write papers about me. But you just help. Because you can. Because you care." Clara looked at this 10-year-old girl with tears on her face and determination in her eyes, and saw herself. Saw the version of herself that had dropped out of MIT to care for her dying mother, that had given up her dreams to survive, that had learned to fix broken things because she couldn't fix her own broken life. Lucia wasn't broken. But maybe Clara was. And maybe helping this kid walk was the first step toward fixing herself. "Your dad's going to kill me," Clara said softly. Lucia's face transformed, hope blazing through the tears. "He won't. He'll protect you. He protects everyone important to me." "Yeah, that's kind of the problem." But even as she said it, Clara knew she'd already made her choice. Not the smart choice. Not the safe choice. But the right one. Okay, Clara said. Okay. We keep going. But new rules. You only come when your dad says it's safe. No arguments, no negotiations. And if things get worse, they won't, Lucia promised, hugging Clara so hard she could barely breathe. Papa will fix it. He fixes everything. Over Lucia's shoulder, Clara caught Marco's eye. The big man's expression was unreadable, but he gave her a single nod. Respect, maybe. Or acknowledgement that she'd just signed up for something she didn't fully understand. That evening, after Lucia left, Clara sat alone in her garage and called Matteo. I'm staying, she said when he answered. I'm going to keep helping Lucia. But I need you to be honest with me. How bad is this? Matteo was quiet for a long moment. Bad enough that I should tell you to run. That I should cut contact to keep you safe. But you won't. But I won't, he agreed. Because my daughter needs you. And what Lucia needs, she gets. Even if it puts me in danger? I'll keep you safe, Clara. That's a promise.
How?
With guards? With guns? That's not keeping me safe, Matteo. That's making me a target. You became a target the moment you helped my daughter. That's not how I wanted things to go. But it's the reality. Now I deal with reality. Clara pressed her palm against her forehead. This is insane. Yes, Matteo agreed. Welcome to my world. I'm sorry you're in it. He hung up before she could respond. Clara locked her garage, walked to her apartment 3 blocks away, and lay awake all night, listening to every car that passed, every footstep on the street below. She'd made her choice. Now, she just had to survive it. It happened on a Tuesday evening just after 6. Clara was making final adjustments to Lucia's left brace, a new ankle mechanism that would give her better lateral stability, when she heard the first engine cut out. Then another. And another. 3 vehicles, all stopping simultaneously within a block of the garage. Marco's head snapped up. His hand went to his jacket. Stay here, he ordered, moving toward the door. Clara's stomach twisted. Marco. The garage's bay window exploded inward. Glass rained across the concrete floor. Clara grabbed Lucia and dove behind her workbench as gunfire erupted. Marco returned fire, backing toward them, his face a mask of controlled fury. Back door, he shouted. Get her out. But before Clara could move, the rear entrance crashed open. 3 men in dark clothes stormed in, guns raised. They weren't there to kill. Clara realized that immediately. They were there to take. The girl, one of them shouted. Just grab the girl. Time split into crystallized moments. Marco took down the first man through the rear door with 2 shots. The front door exploded inward. More men. Too many men. Marco pivoted, firing, but there were too many angles, too many targets. He went down with a grunt, blood blooming on his shoulder. And then it was just Clara and Lucia, surrounded by 4 armed men in a garage full of tools that suddenly looked like toys. Don't hurt her. The man who appeared to be in charge pointed his gun at Clara. We just want the kid. You stay down, you stay alive. Lucia was shaking against Clara's side, whimpering. Clara's mind raced, calculating odds that all came out to 0. 4 armed men. No weapons. No backup. No chance. Except. Clara's hand closed around the pneumatic impact wrench on the workbench behind her. She squeezed Lucia tighter. Run when I say, she whispered. Clara. Trust me. The lead man stepped forward. Kid, come here. Nobody gets hurt if you just. Clara swung the impact wrench, still connected to the air compressor, and hit the trigger. The tool shrieked to life, its metal socket spinning at 8,000 revolutions per minute. She aimed it at the closest man's gun hand. The impact sent his weapon flying. He screamed, clutching his shattered fingers. Now! Clara shoved Lucia toward the small storage closet in the corner, the only space with a lock from the inside. Lock it. Don't come out. Lucia stumbled away as Clara grabbed a bottle of brake fluid from the shelf and threw it at the second man. The bottle exploded against his chest, liquid burning his eyes. He fired blindly, bullets sparking off metal. Clara dove behind the hydraulic lift, her heart hammering. She hit the lift controls. The platform rose with a mechanical whine, creating a makeshift barrier. Not much, but something. The third man circled around. Clara grabbed a welding torch, sparked it to life, and swung the flame in a wide arc. He backed up, and that 1 second hesitation was all she needed to kick his legs out from under him. The impact wrench came down on his wrist. Bone cracked. But the leader was on her now, grabbing her from behind, his arm around her throat. Clara couldn't breathe. Black spots danced in her vision. She stomped on his instep, threw her head back, felt his nose crunch. His grip loosened. Clara spun, grabbed a transmission jack, and swung it with every ounce of desperate strength she had. He went down. But there were more coming through the door. Clara heard their footsteps, their shouted orders. She was out of tricks, out of weapons, out of time. She backed toward the storage closet, standing between the door and the approaching men. If they wanted Lucia, they'd have to go through her. Last chance, one of the new arrivals said, raising his gun. Step aside. Clara spread her arms wider, making herself a bigger target. No. He aimed at her chest. The shot never came. The garage suddenly filled with new sounds, shouting, more gunfire, the screech of tires. Men in dark suits poured through every entrance, moving with military precision. Mateo's men. They swept the attackers with brutal efficiency. No wasted movement, no hesitation, no mercy. It was over in seconds. Then Mateo was there, bursting through the front door, his face twisted with fear Clara had never seen before. His eyes scanned the garage, the broken glass, the blood, the bodies, until they found her. Lucia? His voice was raw. Safe, Clara managed, her legs suddenly shaking. In the closet. She's safe. Mateo moved toward the storage room, but Clara got there first. She knocked on the door. Lucia. It's me. It's over. Open up. The lock clicked. The door cracked open. Lucia's tear-streaked face appeared, and then she was launching herself at Clara, sobbing into her shoulder. Mateo reached them, dropped to his knees, and pulled them both into his arms. His whole body was trembling. You're okay, he whispered, checking Lucia for injuries, his hands shaking. You're okay. You're okay. Clara saved me, Lucia sobbed. They were going to take me, and Clara fought them with tools, and she wouldn't let them pass, and... Mateo looked at Clara over his daughter's head. His eyes were dark, bottomless, filled with something that made Clara's breath catch. Not gratitude. Something bigger. Something that felt like recognition. Like he was finally seeing her. Really seeing her. You stood between them and her, he said quietly. You could have run. No, Clara said simply. I couldn't. Around them, Mateo's men were securing the scene, checking bodies, speaking in clipped professional tones. Marco was being helped up, pressing a hand to his shoulder wound, but alive. The attackers were being zip-tied, dragged away, or loaded into body bags. But in the center of the chaos, in the wreckage of Clara's garage, 3 people knelt on the floor. A father clutching his daughter. A mechanic who'd become something more. And the moment where everything changed. I failed you, Mateo said, and Clara realized he was speaking to her. I promised to keep you safe, and I failed. You got here in time. Barely, his jaw tightened. This ends now. All of it. They touched my family. They threatened my daughter. He stood, still holding Lucia, his face hardening into something terrible and beautiful. They're going to regret being born. Clara struggled to her feet, her muscles aching, her hands shaking with adrenaline come down. Mateo. He looked at her, and Clara saw the monster everyone else feared. The Mafia boss. The killer. The man who solved problems with violence. But he also saw his hand gently smoothing his daughter's hair, heard the fear in his voice when he'd called Lucia's name. "Thank you," Matteo said, and the words carried the weight of a blood oath. "For protecting her. For staying. For being brave when you had every reason to run." He turned to his men. "Get them to the estate. Both of them. Medical teams standing by." "Both." Clara echoed. "You're coming with us," Matteo said, and his tone left no room for argument. "You're not safe here. Not anymore. Not until I've dealt with everyone who orchestrated this." Clara wanted to protest, wanted to argue, wanted to stay in her garage with her simple life of broken cars and overdue bills. But that life was gone. Shattered like the bay window. Destroyed like her sense of safety. She took Lucia's hand. "Okay." They walked out of the garage together, leaving behind blood and glass and the last remnants of the person Clara used to be. The Ricci estate was exactly what Clara had imagined and nothing like it at the same time. Yes, it was massive, 20 acres of manicured grounds in Long Island, walls topped with cameras, guards at every gate. But inside the main house, it felt lived in. Lucia's drawings on the refrigerator. A half-finished puzzle on the dining table. Books scattered across the couch. A home, not a fortress. Though right now it felt like both. Clara sat in the medical room while a doctor, Matteo's personal physician, apparently, cleaned the cuts on her hands and checked her for injuries. Bruised ribs. Strained shoulder. Nothing broken. Nothing that wouldn't heal. The doctor said she was lucky. Clara didn't feel lucky. She felt like she'd been hit by a truck. Through the doorway, she could hear voices rising in the next room. Matteo's study. An emergency meeting with his inner circle. And they were talking about her. Completely unacceptable. That was Vincent, Matteo's second-in-command. Clara had been introduced to him briefly when they arrived. He had a face like carved granite and a handshake that felt like a warning. They knew exactly where to hit us. When to hit us. Because we've been following a predictable pattern for weeks. The pattern was necessary. Matteo's voice, cold and controlled. Lucia needed consistency. Lucia needed safety. Which we can't provide if she's gallivanting to some garage in enemy territory every week. That garage saved her life. Someone else interjected. Tony Marsetti, the security chief. That garage nearly got her killed. Vincent shot back. Boss, you need to see this clearly. The mechanic, she's a liability. As long as your daughter is attached to her, she's a target. We need to cut ties. Clean break. Set the girl up somewhere else, somewhere secure, with proper medical staff. Clara's stomach tightened. She knew this was coming. Had known it since the bullets started flying. No. The new voice was small but absolute. Lucia. Clara stood, ignoring the doctor's protests, and moved to the doorway. She could see them now, Matteo behind his massive desk, Vincent and Tony standing, for other men she didn't know positioned around the room. And Lucia, still in her torn clothes, face pale but chin raised defiantly. "Baby, the adults are talking," Vincent said, not unkindly. "Why don't you?" "No," Lucia repeated louder. "You're talking about Clara. That makes it my business." Matteo's expression was unreadable. "Lucia, maybe you should rest." "I'm not leaving." Lucia's voice shook, but she didn't back down. "You're going to decide things about Clara without her even being here? Without asking me what I want?" "What you want isn't the issue," Vincent said. "What's safe is the issue." "Then make it safe." Lucia's eyes blazed. "You're supposed to be this powerful family, right? You can make anything happen? So make it safe for Clara to help me." "It's not that simple." "Yes, it is." Tears were streaming down Lucia's face now. "Clara stood between me and men with guns. She fought them with tools. She could have run, could have hidden, but she stayed. Because she cares about me. And now you want to throw her away like she's nothing?" "No one's throwing anyone away," Matteo said quietly. "We're trying to protect you. Then protect her too." Lucia turned to her father, her voice breaking. "Please, Papa. I know it's complicated. I know it's dangerous. But Clara makes me feel like I can do anything. Like my disability isn't the most important thing about me. Do you know how rare that is? The room fell silent. Clara watched Mateo's face, saw the war happening behind his eyes. The father who'd give his daughter anything warring with the boss who'd built an empire on cold calculation. If we continue this arrangement, Mateo said slowly, it will require significant changes. More security. Different protocols. Relocating Clara somewhere more defensible. You can't relocate her, Lucia protested. Her garage is her life. Her garage is a crime scene, Vincent interjected. And a known target. She can't go back there. Clara stepped fully into the doorway. I'm standing right here. Maybe include me in decisions about my life? Every head turned. Mateo's eyes found hers, and something passed between them. Acknowledgement. Respect. Understanding. You're right, Mateo said. Clara, please. Join us. She walked into the room, hyper-aware of the dangerous men watching her every move. She'd fought off kidnappers 2 hours ago with an impact wrench. She could handle a business meeting. Vincent thinks we should end your arrangement with Lucia, Mateo said bluntly. For your safety and hers. What do you think? Clara looked at Lucia, then back at Mateo. I think your daughter has made more progress in 3 months than she did in 2 years. I think she's this close to walking without braces. And I think ending it now would break her heart. It might save her life, Vincent argued. She saved mine tonight, Clara countered. If Lucia hadn't locked herself in that closet when I told her to, they would have grabbed her in the chaos.
She was brave.
She was smart. You can't protect her from everything by keeping her in a bubble. We're not talking about a bubble, Tony said. We're talking about basic security protocols. Then upgrade your protocols, Clara said. Move the sessions here. To the estate. I'll come here, instead of Lucia coming to me. You'll have home field advantage, maximum security, controlled environment. Mateo leaned forward, interested. Continue. Set up a workshop. Doesn't have to be fancy. Just space for me to work, tools, equipment. I come twice a week, guarded transport both ways, I never leave the grounds. You get complete control over the situation. And your garage? Vincent asked. Clara's chest tightened. Her garage. Her independence. Her whole identity wrapped up in that failing business with its broken lights and overdue bills. But then she looked at Lucia, hope dawning on her tear-stained face, and Clara knew there was only one answer. The garage can wait, she said. Or close. Or whatever. This is more important. Clara, no, Lucia whispered. Not your garage. Yes, my garage, Clara said firmly. Because you're worth it. And because I'm not walking away from something I started. I don't quit on people. Mateo stood, walked around the desk, and stopped in front of Clara. Up close, she could see the exhaustion in his face, the weight of everything he carried. You'd give up your business for this? He asked quietly. For her? In a heartbeat, something shifted in his eyes. The last wall crumbling. Then we do this properly. Vincent set up the workshop. Spare building near the garage, convert it. Whatever Clara needs, she gets. Tony, security detail for Clara, rotating shifts, drivers, full protection protocol. Boss, Vincent started. She bled for my daughter tonight, Mateo said, his voice cutting like steel. She stood her ground when trained men, with guns, told her to move. She's earned our protection. She's earned everything we can give her. He turned back to Clara. You'll stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll arrange transport to get your things. You'll have an apartment in the city, security included. The workshop will be ready by end of week. I didn't agree to an apartment. You're part of this family now, Mateo said simply. That means we take care of you. Non-negotiable. Clara opened her mouth to argue, then saw Lucia's face. The girl was beaming, actually beaming, despite everything that had happened. Okay, Clara said. But I'm paying rent. Mateo's mouth twitched. Almost a smile. We'll discuss it. As the meeting broke up, advisors filing out still grumbling, Clara found herself alone with Mateo for a moment. Thank you, he said quietly, for choosing her. I didn't really have a choice, Clara admitted. Your daughter is impossible to say no to. She gets that from me. This time Clara did smile. Somehow I believe that. Mateo's hand brushed her arm. Just for a second.
Warm. Steady. Real.
The people who did this, he said. They won't get a second chance. I promise you that. Clara believed him. And that should have scared her. Instead, it made her feel safe for the first time since the bullets started flying. 6 weeks passed like a dream Clara kept expecting to wake up from. The workshop Mateo built her was better than anything she could have imagined. Climate-controlled, state-of-the-art tools, a 3D printer for prototyping, materials she'd only read about in engineering journals, carbon fiber, medical-grade titanium, aerospace aluminum. This is insane, Clara had said the first day, running her hands over the equipment. I could build Iron Man suits with this stuff. Build my daughter new legs first, Mateo had replied. Then we'll discuss the suit. Was that a joke? Clara still wasn't sure, but she thought she'd seen him smile. The routine became natural quickly. Clara arrived Tuesday and Thursday mornings, guarded transport from her new apartment in Manhattan, paid for by Mateo despite her protests. She'd work with Lucia for 3 hours, then tinker in the workshop until evening, refining designs, testing materials, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Lucia's progress was extraordinary. By week 2, she was walking without assistance for 30-minute stretches. By week 4, she jogged a full lap around the estate garden. By week 6, Clara caught her attempting stairs, taking them 2 at a time like any other 10-year-old. Slow down, Clara called, laughing despite herself. You're going to break my masterpiece. Your masterpiece can handle it, Lucia called back, grinning. It was true. The braces Clara had built, the final generation, she called them, were works of art disguised as medical devices. Adaptive pressure systems that responded to gait changes. Microhydraulics for shock absorption. Weight-bearing joints that redistributed stress based on terrain. They were everything Clara had dreamed of building back at MIT, realized in the workshop of a Mafia boss's estate. Life was weird. Mateo started appearing more often. At first, Clara assumed he was checking on security, making sure his investment was protected. But she noticed he came during session times, watched from the doorway, asked questions about the mechanics, the progress, the next steps. You understand this stuff, Clara said one afternoon, catching him studying her blueprint for a transitional ankle joint. The engineering. You're not just being polite. Mateo glanced up. I studied mechanical engineering. 2 years at Columbia before, he gestured vaguely. Life took a different direction. You could have been designing bridges. Instead, I'm managing shipping routes, his mouth quirked. Different kind of engineering. They fell into a pattern. Mateo would bring coffee, real Italian espresso, not the gas station sludge Clara was used to. They discussed Lucia's progress while the girl practiced walking drills in the garden. Small moments. Quiet conversations. One Thursday, Clara looked up from her workbench to find Mateo watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. What? She asked, suddenly self-conscious. You have grease on your face, he said. Same spot every time you work. Right cheek. It's my thinking grease, Clara said seriously. Very important for the creative process. This time, he definitely smiled. Then he reached out, his thumb brushing her cheek, wiping away the smudge. The touch lasted half a second, but left her skin burning. There, he said quietly. Now you look less like a mechanic and more like a miracle worker. Clara's breath caught. They were standing too close, she realized. Close enough to see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Close enough to smell his cologne, something expensive and understated.
Papa.
Lucia's voice shattered the moment. Clara, come watch. I can do a pivot turn without compensating. They stepped apart, the spell broken. But something had shifted. Clara felt it humming in the air between them. The work continued. Clara built the final support frame, the one that would transition Lucia from dependent mobility to genuine independence. It was her masterpiece. lightweight carbon fiber structure, smart response joints, built-in sensors that tracked stress points and adjusted support in real time. "This is it," Clara told Lucia during the fitting. "This is the one that gets you to the finish line." "What finish line?" "Whatever finish line you want," Clara said, adjusting the hip attachment. "Running, dancing, climbing trees, being a normal kid who happens to have cool bionic legs." Lucia hugged her suddenly, fiercely. "Thank you. For everything. For seeing me." Clara hugged her back, blinking hard against sudden tears. "Always, kid. Always." Mateo had been watching from the doorway. When Lucia ran off to test the new frame, he approached Clara. "She loves you," he said simply. "I love her too," Clara admitted. "Didn't mean to. Tried not to, honestly. But that kid makes it impossible." "I know the feeling." They stood in comfortable silence, watching Lucia through the window as she walked, ran, pivoted, moved with a freedom she'd never had before. "My birthday is next week," Mateo said abruptly.
Saturday.
"There's a celebration. Family, associates, the usual performance. I'd like you to come." Clara turned to him, surprised. "Me?
Why?
"Because you're part of this now. Part of Lucia's life. He hesitated. "It would mean something. To both of us. If you were there." Clara knew she should make an excuse. Should maintain professional distance. Should remember that this man lived in a world of violence and danger that she wanted no part of. But when she looked at him, she didn't see the Mafia boss everyone feared. She saw the father who'd tear apart the world for his daughter. The man who brought her coffee and asked about her designs. The person who'd given her the resources to build something that mattered. "Okay," she said. "I'll come." Mateo's face softened. "Good.
That's
Good." He left before she could say anything else, but Clara stood in the workshop for a long time after, her heart doing complicated things she didn't want to analyze. That evening, Lucia cornered her before she left. "Papa likes you," Lucia announced with the brutal honesty of children. Likes you. "He's grateful I'm helping you." "No, it's different. He smiles when you're around. Real smiles, not the fake ones he uses for business people. And he watches you when you're not looking. And last week he asked Rosa if his gray suit was too formal or not formal enough." Clara's cheeks heated. "You're imagining things." "I'm 10, not blind," Lucia said sagely. "And I think it's good. Papa's been alone since Mama died. He deserves someone who makes him happy." "Lucia." "I'm just saying, if you decided you liked him back, I'd be okay with it. More than okay. I'd be thrilled." She skipped away before Clara could formulate a response, leaving Clara standing in the workshop, surrounded by tools and machinery, and the growing realization that somewhere between the bullets and the braces, between the fear and the trust, she developed feelings for Matteo Ricci. Feelings that terrified her more than any gun-wielding kidnapper ever could. Because those men could only hurt her body. This could break her heart. The ballroom was magnificent. Chandeliers dripping crystal, live orchestra, 200 guests in designer clothes who probably spent more on their watches than Clara had made in her entire life. She felt wildly out of place in the black dress Lucia had insisted she buy. "You can't wear coveralls to Papa's birthday," Lucia had said, scandalized. So here Clara stood, in heels that hurt and a dress that cost more than her monthly rent used to, watching New York's elite mingle with people who were definitely not on any legitimate guest lists. "You look terrified," a voice said beside her. Clara turned to find Matteo, devastating in a perfectly tailored black suit. Her mouth went dry.
I'm fine, Shalit.
"Just wondering how many people here could have me killed with a phone call." "Only about half," Matteo said, and she couldn't tell if he was joking. "The other half would need 2 phone calls." Very reassuring. His eyes traveled over her, slow and appreciative. "You look beautiful." Before Clara could respond, Lucia appeared, practically vibrating with excitement. She wore a red dress and her final generation braces, the ones Clara had spent 6 weeks perfecting. "It's time," Lucia whispered. "Are you ready?" "Ready for what?" Lucia just grinned and headed toward the orchestra. She whispered something to the conductor, who nodded and raised his baton. The music stopped. Conversations died. Mateo tensed beside Clara. "What is she doing?" "I have no idea," Clara said, but her heart was already racing. Lucia stood in the center of the ballroom, every eye on her. Then, with deliberate care, she reached down and unclipped her braces. Both of them. Clara's breath stopped. They'd practiced walking without support, yes, but only for short distances. Only in the privacy of the workshop. "Lucia," Mateo said urgently, starting forward. But Lucia was already moving. She took one step, then another, walking across the ballroom floor completely unaided, her head high, her movements careful but confident. The braces dangled from her hand like shed armor. The room erupted in gasps, then stunned silence. Lucia walked the full length of the ballroom, maybe 40 feet, and stopped directly in front of her father. She was breathing hard, her legs shaking slightly, but she was standing. On her own. Unassisted. "Happy birthday, Papa," she said, her voice clear in the silence. "Look what I can do." Mateo made a sound Clara had never heard from him, something between a laugh and a sob. He dropped his knees and pulled Lucia into his arms, his shoulders shaking. The room exploded in applause. Clara stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, as she watched this hard, dangerous man hold his daughter and cry openly in front of everyone. No mask, no control, just a father overwhelmed by a miracle. When Mateo finally stood, his eyes found Clara across the crowd. The look he gave her was so raw, so full of gratitude and something deeper, that she felt it in her bones. He kept one arm around Lucia and raised his other hand. The room fell silent again. "Most of you know my daughter has struggled with mobility since her accident," Mateo said, his voice thick with emotion. "What you don't know is that 3 months ago, a mechanic from Brooklyn fixed her car and changed our lives." He gestured to Clara. Every head turned. "Clara Martinez," Mateo continued, "is the reason my daughter can walk, the reason she can run, the reason she's standing here tonight without assistance. She saw a problem no specialist could solve and fixed it with genius and spare parts." Clara wanted to disappear, wanted to sink through the floor. "As of tonight," Mateo said, his voice taking on the tone of someone making a decree, "Clara is officially Lucia's rehabilitation engineer and is under my family's protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me." The message was clear. Clara wasn't just Lucia's helper anymore. She was under the protection of one of New York's most powerful families. Untouchable. The applause was deafening. Hours later, after dinner and cake and endless congratulations from people Clara would never remember, she found herself on the estate's rooftop terrace. The city sprawled below, a river of lights against the darkness. "Hiding." Mateo's voice came from behind her. "Recovering," Clara corrected. That was intense. He joined her at the railing, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You gave my daughter her life back. I wanted everyone to know. I just built some braces." "You built hope," Mateo said quietly. "You built freedom. You built a future she thought she'd lost." They stood in silence, watching the city breathe. "Thank you," Mateo said finally, "for staying, for fighting, for caring about her when you had every reason to walk away." "I couldn't walk away," Clara admitted. "From either of you." Mateo turned to face her. In the moonlight, he looked younger, less burdened. "Clara." "Don't," she said softly. "Don't say something we can't take back. Not yet. Let's just let this be what it is." "And what is it?" Clara smiled. "Something real. Something good. Something worth protecting." Mateo's hand found hers on the railing. Their fingers intertwined naturally, like they'd done it 1,000 times before. "I can work with that," he said. Below them, Through the terrace doors, they could see Lucia showing off her walking to anyone who'd watch, her face radiant with joy. Clara thought about the rainy night 3 months ago when a car had broken down outside her failing garage. How she'd almost ignored it, almost let them pass by. Instead, she'd fixed a car and changed 3 lives forever. Hers, Lucia's, Matteo's. A mechanic with grease-stained hands had walked into a Mafia boss's world and cracked it open, letting in light he'd forgotten existed. And standing here, watching the city, holding the hand of a man who terrified and fascinated her in equal measure, Clara realized something important. She'd spent years fixing broken things, cars, engines, machines. But somewhere along the way, she'd been broken too. Broken by loss and failure and dreams deferred. And maybe, just maybe, in helping Lucia walk, she'd learned to stand again herself. "What are you thinking?" Matteo asked. Clara squeezed his hand. "That I should send a thank you note to whoever made your car break down that night." Matteo's laugh was warm and genuine. "I'll let them know." They stayed there until the stars faded, two people who'd found something unexpected in the chaos. Something neither of them was ready to name. But something that felt an awful lot like the beginning of everything.